Right. Hi. Let's start with Lamrim Kappa Guru Yoga. Then we'll recite the verse for refuge and bodhicitta for correcting motivation. And then we might go back to sleep. All right. From the heart of the saver of the 100 deities of Chitta on the peak of cloud resembling a clump of extremely fresh, white fresh curd, King of Dhamma, omniscient, lost and Drakpa, please come here together with your sons. In the sky before me on the lion throne, lotus and moon, my perfect pure Guru smiles with delight. Supreme field of merit from a mind of faith, please abide for 100 eons to spread the teachings. Your holy mind is the intelligence that understands the full extent of objects to be known. Your holy speech, which is excellent explanation, is an ear ornament for those of good fortune. Your holy body is radiantly beautiful with glory renowned. To you are meaningful to see, hear, and remember are prostrate. Pleasant drinking water, various flowers, fragrant incenses, light-scented waters, and so forth. Oceans of cloud-like offerings, but actually arranged and mentally emanated, they offer to you the supreme field of merit. Whatever non-virtue of body, speech, and mind, especially those opposite to the three vows that I have collected from beginningless time, I confess each and every one with fervent regret from my heart. You strove for much learning and practice in this degenerate age and made your freedoms and richnesses meaningful by abandoning the 8 worldly concerns. Savvy, we sincerely rejoice in your extensive deeds. Perfect, pure, holy gurus from the billion clouds of wisdom and compassion in the sky of the Dhammakaya. Please let fall the rain of profound and extensive Dhamma upon the receptacle of those to be subdued exactly as they need. May whatever virtue I have collected benefit the teachings and alone transmigrated beings, and in particular may it cause the essence of perfect, pure, lost and Drakpa's teachings to shine forever. Sashi poki junshi meto Tamri Rablingshi Nidegen Padi Sangye Shindu Miktebuwa Girdokunamda Shinla Chupasho. By the merits of having offered this mandala to Lama Tsongkhapa and his 2 sons, may I, my family members, and all sentient beings be able to meet, practice, and actualize the teachings of the victorious one, Lost on Drakpa, who had the morality of eminently pure way of life, was courageous in extensive conduct of the son of victorious ones, and accomplished the yoga of 2 stages of supreme bliss and emptiness. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kaniyatayami. By the force of having fervently requested in this way, hollow beams of white light are emitted from the hearts of the perfect pure Father and Sons, and combining into one enter my crown. White nectar, the color of milk, flows from the opening of the tube of white light, cleansing all my sicknesses, spirit harms, negative karmas, obscurations, and the imprints without exception. My body becomes as pure and clear as crystal. So we're going to go up to page 13 and do the 5-line Mixima verse 3 times. Nimitse wete chechen rezi, jime kembe wambo jampe yan, dupu malu jomze sanweda, kanche kiebe tsugen tsongapa, lo sandra be shamla soade. Nimitse wete chechen rezi, jime kembe wambo jampe yan, dupu malu jomze sanweda, kanche kiebe tsugen tsongapa, lo sandra be shamla soade. Nimitse wete chechen rezi, jime kembe Wambo Jambeyan, Dubu Malu Jomze Sanweda, Kanchik Yebe Tsugen Songrapa, Losandra Beshavla Soade.
Sangye Chedan Tsogi Chonam La Chanchu Badu Dani Kyabsu Che Dagi Chishe Gibe Tsonangi Drola Penche Sangye Droparasho Sangye Chedan Tsogi Chonam La Chanchu Badu Dani Kyabsu Che Dagi Chishe Gibe Tsonangi Drola Penche Sangye Droparasho Sanji
Chodan
Chodan
Tsogi
Tsojin
Chonam
Chonam
La
La
Chanchu
Chanchu
Badu
Badu
Dani
Dani
Kapsu
Kapsu
Chi Dagi
Dagi
Chishe
Chishi
Gibe
Gibin
Tsona
Tsonam Jin Drola
Drola Penchi
Sanjin
Sage
Drupala
Lopa Sho.
Sho Kanki Tuzini Zone Tawa Tamje Pambi Chere Tambi Chun Dunze Kodam Kela Changse Lo. Good morning, everyone. Tekazing on the Lamrim drink it someday, the Nimbo Kundu Jebu top says take Kabdu Tene. Roger Resra, the Nimbo Kundu Jebu top layer, Truk, do the Samala Temba, Tomba Nila Meba, Deva la Temba, Kuzu la Temba, Choba la Temba, Ani Sen la Temba said.
We've been looking at Lama Tsongkhapa's middling presentation of the steps of the path of enlightenment, and in the previous session or sessions, we began the topic of purifying karma or actions done before using the 4 powers of the antidote. Now, of the 4 powers, we're now covering the second power, which is the power of thorough application of an antidote. So looking at what Lama Tsongkhapa says with respect to the power of thorough application of the antidote, right? The power of fully applying the antidotes. It says that there are 6 points to the application of these antidotes, relying on the profound sutras, believing in emptiness, relying on recitation, relying on images, relying on worship, and relying on names.
Direta Tajda Nimbo Kundu Jebu top Shikon, the Shadam Chedelia, Juguenza, and the Juguyores, Kansana, the Jugoyadi, and Jandun Dan, Shendun Kalatunaya, and Nimbo top Shikon, Shadam and Jugoyadi, and Suzuki Gentris or Chagoros, Suzuki Langan Sorach, Gentisigra, Gentry, Suzula TV, Gain. So
here, when we look at the power of thorough application of the antidote, we'll look at antidotes applied to actions done before in relation to self and others. And since those actions were done in relation to self and others are done by oneself, then we also have the responsibility then to use such application of antidotes.
The Junzin Carriers Lounge, Tanganzo Devon Devadan, Dungam Mendevati, Ganzola Ranchi Suyaba, and Samolo Chigiri, but T Tony, and it Deva Druvia, the Sosu top down, Dunga said the Sosu top downza, that they do call it in Jungri Lounge, they do the any pig lay sanging like Tenny, and they do Junguyores. Tinzata Chikle Sambo Sayatan. Lengemba pa ani ponya laya ani tapchig yabadi shagdam lan jubatres ro nimuto shigo ne shagdam lan juba tinza ani ngone thane ki dewa chik yan ta ba chik pegi laya shivi dewa chik ro ranjin ni gale phembi ki chik deji chin dugu yabana ani yinjimin jigita nimuto shigo ne shagdam lan yan jugo gores ro tema tabi yo maris ta shamba tabi chi yo maris ro.
And this thorough application of negative actions using the power of the antidote begins with recognizing that all of us want to be happy and none of us wants to experience suffering. So then looking at the happiness that we want to cultivate, the suffering that we do not wish to seek, and asking ourselves, where does it arise or where does it come from? Well, it is coming from actions that we have accumulated. So actions or karma that we have accumulated contribute to happiness or suffering. So that being the case, then we here looking at the actions that we have accumulated before, we purify them or we abandon them using the 4 powers of the antidote. And as such, it would be of benefit to oneself, it would be of benefit to others. Through that, we're going to attain the bliss of a peaceful state. So there is no other way to purify such actions accumulated before other than using the 4 paths of the antidote.
Derda mambushumugo tonerotni the pangram rodi ra nyamning pangram rodi saje tagara tone drova in the pe masiva yaguyungo sares do this samol temba ra do this samole tense on the kanji and chomden di song tsebi ta jagar penruji ani jangolam songo chimbi tsebi ta chik pe kanji jongita ani kidu nidengi kewsuguta song la ya jutukbayna ani legni namshati ngontrugres ra so shagdam chigi bayna shagdam chising baji chagres ra tombani gongui bayna tombani ngontrbachi ngontrbitonda tombani gomtuya chanju sem ngontrbitonda chanju sem gomtuyaji ta dode samola temba digi yongros ra ti kichishu tambu kichishu di dode samola temba di chagores ra.
So the section for us indicates the order of practice, the sequencing of practice. So looking at that again, it says it has 6 points, beginning with relying on the profound sutras. So it is a really good way of looking at the order, the sequence of a practice, beginning with, first of all, the introduction to the teachings that the Buddha, the Bhagavan, gave to us, the Buddha, then the Indian masters, the Indian pandits, then those Indian masters coming from the Arya lands of India, and then explanation that was given to us by masters of the snowy land of Tibet, such as Lama Tsongkhapa and his spiritual children, such as Kejubje and so forth. So then we get, first of all, an introduction to the teachings as presented by them, teachings on emptiness. So they give, if you wonder how then do I put into practice in sequence those stages of the path, well, we have an introduction to emptiness. We have an introduction to bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment, and we're introduced to them through these profound sutras. And this is what Lama Tsongkhapa says here in relying on the power of the fully applying the antidotes, beginning with relying on the profound sutras that introduce those topics to us.
Redang anzu ji chue nyamling cheduta lama jile tengorase da lama tsende jile tembaina ya lama tsende jile teni chue chebaina dodile teni chue chegu dos ra ani jagargi ani pendru ta jingomulu ru tsebe ani pendru chubden la so didia ani chomden digi song de shisha utoni chomden digi song shila shabitoni ma dojala ya ani chue cheji rendu mado 소소소게 강상바지 라 아니 셰지 레몬도스 아니 장고로 무슨가 버치면 동가 이게 추출디 쇼지기 베 야침부 띵사부 송여데 이네 대 아니 시자스디 루루야스기 숑 시샤네 마 송고도스 딘자 도데 사몰라야 마데 란디 도데 사몰라 마데 바탑 메바인자 텔테니 디 소수기 비길야 so river dream ani lock samlota tu chebaina ani do de samu tendi chi koromni chen mantu baji tene ratu yores ra tinza tipe masiba kechembo.
So for our practice of the Dhamma, we rely upon a teacher. We rely upon a Lama. We rely upon fully qualified Lamas. So we need to rely upon them to practice the Dhamma. And in relying upon them, we're relying on their teachings of the profound sutras, the 17 Pandits of Nalanda, chiefly Pandits such as Nagarjuna and so forth. So based on the Bhagavan's teachings, the Indian masters gave an explanation, and those explanations are those which are taught to us by the Lama that we rely upon, which means that when we rely upon the Lama or a Lama and we receive teachings from them, it's not that what they teach us is their own idea or their own thoughts of what the teachings are. It's rather that when we rely upon them, they give us an explanation of the teachings came from the Buddha, based upon which the 17 Pandits of Nalanda have composed their explanations. And also, when we look at the writings of Lama Tsongkhapa, which are extensive and profound, quoting from or relying upon sources such as Nagarjuna and his spiritual children, we can see that we have to rely upon those teachings. We have to rely upon this profound sutra. So we become focused or concentrated in approach to it. We read them, we think about them, so that in understanding them, we'd be able to understand the sequence of a practice without becoming confused about the order. This is extremely important.
데리다 단 도드 사무스 라운디 다치다 베 아니 다 망부 슈지어라스 다 도드 사무로 아니 매직이 메제나로야 로고 총나야 다 로투야 카부라스 이네 디난기 nenga 치슈 도서 아니 주토야치 라 다드소지 아니 수주기 원탄네기 룽아 이스음 기치 르테사기 다 기비신인 틴디여바나 안 드줄레 케지 티치네 아니 케치슈 카르레스 조 가를 땡걸 어 딘지 톤 삼다바이나 아니 베나 셔르님부터 어디 셔르님부터 오늘 단에게 아 쇼직베 개치 묻자고 그랬어. 그러 이제 여러분이 뒤따도 손대 드릴라. 더 셔르님 보기 더 산지 좀 된디기 비기다 아 추억 난기다 믹스기 개치 연하면아디 아니 사무땀 tomanyigi tendres ta di tengi chi sik nyongla ten pegi duba sabati ani sherabni bot chagores ta di dawoji ro nimata bot tembaina di tundonji mado yo marwas di te malam kya di tan sanglo ta otu sin robaina ani shuji gi chok saya ngone tanni bigba taya gi gyu 다 지금 너데 사mol에 땜바 셔르니 몰에 땜바 델레 사가지 수수를 쪼바나 여사 말이지 안 디톨이야 다 지금 라미넨저 텐디 베나 간델라게 만데 믹스마 상에나 안 딘디 라미넨저 때 테네 셔르니 뭐 맞된 디톨 상다 또 신조바나 오늘 전에 뱀 마스비 야후 차고 서리스 라
So then in thinking of reading through the profound sutras, there's so many profound sutras and it's hard to read all of them in one's life. So then since it is so difficult to read through all of them in one's life, you might wonder, how then do I hone down on the important points? Well, when we rely upon a virtuous friend with our Buddha speech in mind, we can ask them, what are the important points that we need to pull out from those profound sutras? So for example, one of the sutras is the Heart Sutra, which is so important to us. His Holiness has been teaching the sutra every so often. So we read through the Heart Sutra, and the attributes of the Heart Sutra, this is to say the teachings, the profound teachings of this sutra, is the profound emptiness. So it is a short sutra, doesn't use a lot of words, and the meaning of them is deep and profound. So we recite the sutra, we make aspirations, we think of the meaning of the things that we recite, and through that we accumulate the collections, we purify obscurations. So in that sense, there is nothing higher or better that we can use, that we can do in order to accumulate the collections and purify obscurations. And we can combine that also with the practice of Guru Yoga. Like, for example, we might do the practice of the 100 deities of the land of joy, Ganel Hagema, together with the recitation of the Miktsima verse, and then recite the Heart Sutra. So if we take this approach, we'll have a good outcome.
제드닝 라드는 간로 레로 차오진 바이나 아니 튼동도스 땜 바이나 아니 레라도스라 콜식 니뇽 아니 텐다 베사부 슈치 삼다예죠 라 라미넨조인 바이나 간델라 자만데 믹스마타 딜리 통 라미넨주 페지 메와도 크리스 pigita chik chansang chanding yana dumba chansang chanding ta laminen ju kyamban ta gandel ha jamale laji the susungun tongu jigyo maresro odinji che ani sherebni butolaya sangli tambana sanji chue kashi tanga ji chue yakbu shego do ngalo mamu droso nanchula ina tangi nanchu tsende jango setting tindi trobo tindi yes timbana nanchu tsende janya di pigi dembani dembashi ani ninji da chanju sem sejora o di tolaya lojong yakbu chen sem ten 제반다 남바 챈데리라 난추 델 하가직 난추 챈데 자야직 자원이니요 말이스라 데리다
그래서 ninja 단전적인 상lai. So particularly for those of us who are lazy, and Geshe said that he, for example, is very lazy. So we want to have something that is short, to rely upon something that is short and concise, which will also make it easy to recite and put into practice. So thinking of, for example, the Heart Sutra, which is a concise sutra. So it has few words, and you can also take the time to think of the meaning of the words. So if you then combine it with the practice of Guru Yoga together with the Heart Sutra. So within the Guru Yoga practice, such as the Ganden Lagema, the hundreds of deities of the land of joy, you have a full practice of the 7 limbs of worship. So you can practice that. And in some sense, if you go through that, you don't need much more than that. So you combine that with the practice of the Heart Sutra. So Geshe had a conversation with one of his friends who said that he's been Buddhist for many years, but he wanted to become a really good Buddhist practitioner, fully qualified Buddhist practitioner. So what should be approach to becoming a fully qualified Buddhist practitioner? Well, if you base on your practice such as this, doing a Guru Yoga practice together with the Heart Sutra practice, you want to combine with that the principle or the aspects of your practice, the development of an understanding of the 2 truths, applying key points of the practice such as the development of compassion, bodhicitta, and so forth. If you combine an understanding of the 2 truths into your practice, if you use it to develop bodhicitta, compassion, and so forth, it means that you become a fully qualified Buddhist practitioner.
dindi chigreshasirwada tireda ngoni igi tangi thambu tanjang rojik shegwars ta thambu tanjang suzugi thambu tanjang kayimba di she tuyagi ta bezun chigiyes tichidi and dikale ya chik susugi susule gen yobati pa chetu bayna tige tangarang semle ya pengen rojik ro ngone nga dindi lelo change member na and tadanga dil hagach yacha gyata mangan dil tsetoj le yobati ngarangara choba chetu yes kansna lama giwisini samgi mekeba ya cheyores ani churo ngone thani ge pe jizun jambi ya taw pe namji ching ta churo gyata mambu kilaya ani lochuta mambu la ya de rayores inaya ta chi suzu lelo sawenza pegi zundu shu menza ani shiuji pegi ani lama giwisini da ani churo tindiji yoba and nashingi ya yandro matuya di susugi ta chi susu machibi genji imba dingi ngonsum dun tongo dosra ngonsum tongo de diza di chegimen dos di susu di chegimen dos di susu le iji chingina di chegimen dos lavya di ngarang geng soroch tongo dosra
Susu chingmido.
susu chegimen dos.
Okay. So then Geshe is trying to be as honest as he can. He's making effort in giving teachings, particularly making effort during teachings to approach that with an honest attitude as much as he can. And to do that, then he also needs to then admit the faults that he has, in a sense that to become knowledgeable of the faults that he has. And if he does recognize his own faults, become cognizant of his own faults, then it really benefits the mind. So one of the things that Geshe said is that he's been lazy. Actually, without laziness, he would have achieved, his achievements would have been so much better. After all, in his life, he had the opportunity to rely upon Lama's virtuous friends, inconceivable Lama's virtuous friends. And he also studied for more than 2 decades together with thousands of Dhamma friends who you can say that some of them were like Manjushri himself. So because of his laziness, he wasn't able to progress in the way that some others have done. Without laziness, surely Geshe reckons that he would have achieved much greater things in this life. So he wasn't able to do that because of his own laziness. So this is something that you can see directly. So this is something that all of us can do. All of us can recognize our own faults, and at least we can recognize those faults and make sure that we do not behave in a similar way.
남주 최종 토니 사주 최종 용거라서 격부시 두마도라 소바다 딘디다 미소스레 개바여마도 자자자도 소스 가주 때바 디츠기 아니 신기여바디 냠뇽이었으라 메제 로존소르 친 대반자 아니 학도는다 단단 딘디로지 아니 추술 사모토순 지온디 데스 거야 여보 소리야 여보디 아니 라마기위시니 아니 추로소까지 두사원디 된다베 아니 참자는 가고공야도 아스라 기우차도 디 기우페차도 아스라 아도 비기 감정론 기우차야다 칼라선 기우차야 년 기우사야디 디 기우춘 레모도 디 야자야다마 디 소소리야 아니 샘 마세반로야 아니 지 룰레 나사용야 디 규소르지 참선을 야지야다 딘디론 통구도스라 가서 참 비길레지 아니 계절 라마다시 지 쇼다 somebody 마세교르지 아니 비 선반남다 쇼기야랑 컨텐츠는 초보지 비 디스콤로지다 아니 지 somebody 세르로지르지 양로지르지 딘디 용구도 왔으라 참을 용토그로 왔으라
So you might be thinking to yourself, I'm incapable of studying. It's not going to work out for me. I'm not able to put it into practice. It's not going to work out for me. This is of the worst type of laziness that we have, looking down on ourselves and thinking that such things are beyond our capacity. I'm not going to be able to do it. So all of us have a degree of intelligence. All of us are smart in our own ways, in a sense that we have different degrees of wisdom or intelligence. So it might be that for some of us, we're not going to be able to understand some of the points as quickly as others. But still, if we put our mind into studying a particular thing, in time we will develop an understanding or knowledge of those points. If effort is made, we will develop an understanding of such points. So then Geshe looks at his life and it recognizes that he had the chance in his life to study profound teachings first of all, from very kind lamas, spiritual teachers, together with Dhamma friends. So he really rejoices, is happy for the opportunity that he had in his life for being able to study those profound teachings. So really rejoicing in those things, because sometimes we have that idea that actually if you don't do that, put an effort into your study, but you do other things, like for example, you go out, you hang out with your friends, you have good food, you kind of chill out, that's going to really make your mind happy. Actually, it doesn't really make the mind happy to that degree. Geshe reckons that often it works the opposite way, in that it is actually making your mind unclear. At least Geshe recognizes that days that he spends hanging out, going out, hanging out with others, at the end, the mind is becoming not that clear. The mind is actually quite unclear. Whereas where he wakes up, days in which he wakes up in the morning, and he begins his morning with doing his practice, so doing recitations, doing meditations, and so forth, the mind then becomes much clearer throughout the day.
어디래서 된다 이버디 동번일라 메버세티 들다 개치슈디로 님부꾼도 라 님문바다 시지르바 탐지기 님부체 통인디 동번이 또 이시들에 마도 신수지요 말했어. 그러 우리 님부체 통인디.
Now let's look at the second part of the six powers of the antidote, six powers of fully applying the antidote. So the second is believing in emptiness. So the antidote to emptiness, the antidote to our afflictive states of mind would be the exalted knowledge that realizes emptiness. That is the actual antidote to our afflictions. So the second power of fully applying the antidote is believing in emptiness. As it says here, the second is to enter into selflessness and luminous reality, and to trust in primordial purity.
내나노라야 다메지 외사위 춘일란 죽진 데만이 탁벌 이치보스.
Yeah, to enter into selflessness and luminous reality, and to trust in primordial purity.
다메바 세디 아니 다메바 다지메바 어딘디도질이야 고아마임바 다디 피기 장왕도 메바 로 땐닌 종아임바치 야 아니 땐닌 종아임바디 최탐제 땐닌 종아임바디 고추 닐루레스 로 최탐제 아니 가서다 장왕도 마트방 땐닌 종아디 추 닐루 네출 고마디 테레스 다디 야부 아니 세우치 라트바이나 아니 추 닐루라야 몽비그 몽바디 도도그레스 몽바세도그레스 몽바세바이나 몽비왕기 아니 차바키데야 몽비왕기 아니 다완키데야 몽비왕기 때니 지 초롱체데야 탁도사데 도저 참을론 가도그레스 도저 참을론 가도그레스 다 띵가바이나 텔레템비기 아니 레미기와 생기디 용구여 말 테메나 아니 동하기 기여 말 동하기 기메나 동하 란신 가도에스 어디다 아니 산지위 추 로스 네수 고마도디 테레스.
So here the section refers to, first of all, entering selflessness, right? So it says, the second is to enter into selflessness. So selflessness, the absence of the self, does not mean to say that the self does not exist at all. This is not the meaning of selflessness. It's not this nihilistic approach in which we think that the self doesn't exist at all. Selflessness means that the self does not exist independently, which means that the self arises in dependence upon others, which is also the state of being of all phenomena. All phenomena are not independent, which is to say that no phenomena is independent. Phenomena arise in dependence upon others. This is how they exist. This is the way of being. So not understanding that, our mind is confused. So through understanding selflessness, we dispel this confusion. We overcome this confusion. And if we overcome this confusion, the confusion of ignorance, then we will also overcome anger, which arises from confusion, anger or hostility, attachment. We will also overcome partiality and jealousy. All of these will cease if we were to dispel ignorance. And if anger and aggression, jealousy, partiality will cease, there will also be no non-virtue, in a sense that the causes of suffering will also cease. And if the causes of suffering will cease, then naturally there will also be no suffering for us. And therefore, with respect to what it says here at the beginning, to enter selflessness, this is the real Dharma of the Buddha.
Odireda di dindigi di abujiyongelaya demba shigi nesuldi shuji kechemburo demba shigi nesuldi laya shuji yabu cheban denshi yabu jingontraban danganzu demba shijang dige ane dunga demba kunju demba kobe demba lamji demba tatiristos odindiraujigi pa shashabayna ane semla pengmaros ngone thanigi bigi denshi laya jugni dungar di yakbu jingon trebayna dungar rabat samayimba dungar thamu digiti ani dunga imba jingon trebayna did the tachik du bigi dorja imba chik tachik du mugu wicho imba chik tondi ani digi did doya giche du tablaya yacha yataman jugores da digi gu seju chielaya ani lo shuk chenbu tonin jugyaji yunguyores ra lo shuk chenbu tonin jugondi namju bigi ripa dimni dunga gi tsache ondi dunga gi tsawadi ngontrabach teni kunjung di kanji chagda monsum di dunga gi tsawa imba di same thing ni bigi ya ratrabach yunguyosares dille bayna ta chagda monsum di kyo imbach ra dunga gi tsawa imba tondi ta chi chagda monsum gi kyo rakba soroji dan 통과를 다 디통디 아니 시기 착단디 용로 용다 제제온디 아니 마리발에 투여봐 되는 마리바 비길이야 따온디 마리바도 로바인 버지 통 디통온디 다 되니 착단기 깨는도 통과를 다 되니 리버 dim니 아니 람라야 베바이나 아니 착단디 아니 비기다 직 동비 인라바 팀들야지 진행해봐 차들야지 탑시 야지야다만 연구를 디 So to
do it well, we need then to begin with developing the understanding of the way of being according to the Four Truths. So this is so important to understand the Four Truths, how things are in relation to the Four Truths. So we might be thinking that I already understand the Four Truths. What is there after all? True suffering, true origin, true cessations, and true path. I got it. If we leave it like that, then it's not going to really help us to just be able to name or to list down the Four Truths in this way. What we need to do is to engage the Four Truths, and on that basis to develop, first of all, an understanding of suffering. Not just the cause levels of suffering, but also the subtle levels of suffering. So if we then understand that, the mind becomes and develops an understanding of also the subtle levels of suffering, then this state of mind will arise in us in which we think that this is not what I want. This is not what I need. What I need to do is to overcome these sufferings. So this strong intentionality will arise in your mind to overcome this suffering. So that if you then become focused on that, you identify not only suffering, but also you identify the origins of suffering. Your mind develops an understanding of the origins of suffering, so that you understand that the origin of your suffering are anger, attachment, those poisons, which are in turn based on ignorance. And ignorance is a wrong awareness, a wrong consciousness. So then you also understand that if you focus on the development of the path through which you dissolve those causes of suffering, anger, attachment, and so forth into an empty sphere, then they will, in that way, you will make them stop. They will cease to exist. So this will become a genuine Buddha Dharma, or genuine Dharma practice.
Terdenza Mariba, Chadang Zawad Mariba, Maribi in Zindandi, and the Dadu Truba said, Kanji, Rawang Truba, Kanlaya Maduba, Rawang Truba, Tiampegi, and the Tsu Shansati, Nga Rani, and Shanlaya Maduba, Rawang Truba Tavich, Ya Zimbateleta, Mariba Segores. The D in the Mindi, Muyu Nitsu Shilashani. Ngoyo netsul shilashani maribigi zimba nanshin tenla nigdumun takje cheda ani takje dita tichigo da rigbig ton ro pigi ta chikjamden dig sonja sendo da chik lama kera chimuji song set sam mahimba susu namchu teni ma cheba chion digi ani shenla ya tengi yeme di tong tuge ro to tuge chagorda dita shenla ya teni jongwa the tension in Bach Ratron Ratriaji, Yashiatama Yunguris.
The root of anger and attachment is ignorance. And of the different types of ignorance, the main one that we speak about here is ignorance of grasping at the self. Ignorance of grasping at the self is taking the self to exist independently, to be established independently without depending upon others. So particularly when we think of the notion of self, I, the notion of I that we have, this notion of self that we have is of an independent self, the one that does not depend upon others. It arises independently. This is what we call ignorance. So then, does the self exist in this way or not? We take that as the basis for our investigation. On that basis, we then start to analyze using reasons and logic. In our investigation, we don't just quote things that were said by others. Like, for example, it's not that we just say that it is like that because the Buddha said so, or because those lamas, virtuous friends, have said such and such. Rather than taking this process of analysis and investigation just as a process in which, by which we quote others, we really check out whether things exist in a way that ignorance apprehends them to exist using reasons and logic. So our mind gets engaged with that critical analysis. And if we do that, certainly 100% certainly that we can come to see that things exist as dependently originated phenomena. We can understand phenomena as dependent origination.
There's the tension di pina tension matobi chungayo main sona jingi. Tension main bi chungaya meba chikpila ratrin tension la ya lo commandi and tension gi yik chobach yunguyo sares. Yutamazu that dinjedo. Tension gi yik chondi, tension gi somebody yik chondi, teni nutsi somebody ranshin gadrea. Shenla tenin jonga digilaya, yik chondi, shenla ya tume ki chawachia di, samlo tanya di, ani ranshin gadrea chik yunguyores. Ani tenjong somebody na, ani tsewa mebi ki chajo di, ngangi ledea chik. Yachikatamba direshas ro. Tenjong koya chiyabaya teni kondro nyonya, ani chakdan nyongroya, sem kaduna pakpeba sayadi, and nguyo netsul pigi ngubi nelu di ngubi nelu chugi in slavra chugi in ngomadreda chugi in telaya lo chok tukwa na teni tsumi namdo tigidi rangshin gado war dinza da dinza sem pa mape yagi gyubja kor lego maras ro.
So we will develop an understanding of dependent origination. As one text says, there is no phenomena that is not dependently arisen. So we attend the mind to dependent arising, dependent origination. And once we become accustomed to dependent origination, the mind becomes inspired. The mind delights in dependent origination. And what happens is that naturally harmful intents or harmful behavior ceases. It abates, it ceases, which means that naturally your behavior becomes a non-violent or non-harmful behavior. So we go through the process of contemplating dependent origination, dependently arisen phenomena, and through that our anger and attachment decrease. They come to abate, and through that the mind is made more relaxed, which is another way of describing the mind turning towards the Dhamma Dhatu, or the sphere of the Dhamma. Through that, incorrect mental attentions that we pay to objects abate, which means that through that we form the mind to be a particular type of mind, a particular shape of mind, you could say.
가서다 간주 하고도 다 비다 나오 냠비 나 냠비 로 칸라야 되메기다 지 나디 슈크챵부 슈진 제온디 아니 나라 누구도 나라 야부 지금도 나라 지 지금도 사운디 데니 콘로 차단 참말로 안 델덴 리기도 왔다디 디 간주니다 뇽에 초그라스라 다 아니 지 비가 아니 수수로를 찾대바 난신기 자만도 매바 안직 때니 딱 선바시 임바직 에기 아니 샘지 때 투바이나 안직 나라직 제마스 냠비기 아니 남도디 라도스레스 티 매바이나 아니 티 균선드 손이 작단께 돼야지 란싱 라도라스 텐자 땡종 네루세디 아니 산지기 추거다 아니 사와 타두바데레야 고 임바직 시샤니 델레야 니나라야 이체바 치고를 세 델레야 샘든 델레 이치진 델레야 르킨 안 디톨레 상로단 데 딩온 트바지 요한 쇼스 몰람캡 쳬버비 차지 제바나 야자야다마다 야우차고서레스로.
When we see the strong apprehension that we have of the self, of me, we cling to it so strongly. We think in some situation, that person have done that to me, they've said it's to me, they caused this to me, and this strong grasping at me is what gives rise to anger. And we can see that based upon a personal experience, how when we grasp at me so strongly, anger arises. So rather than apprehending I or me to exist in this way, we regard I to exist only as being imputed, not existing independently, but merely being imputed. And when you apprehend the I to exist in this way, then this superimposition of this independently existing self is being lost, is being loosened and lost. And therefore, this dependent origination is the final root of the Buddha Dhamma. So the second power here of that sixfold division of the power of full application of the antidote is believing in emptiness, right? So believing in emptiness, in that we aspire towards emptiness, we make offerings to it, we take refuge in emptiness. This is believing in emptiness.
다 somebody 얘기 잡아서 소비 손 잡아잖아 아니 대바이나 그 가서다 Sendinch and Devju Chetugores. One tani pento country you make be Nenga Musim Tony, and you get such them by na Shujigitane love Chimuchagwasares. That didn't kind me by Naro, not Kibuchi on show, not the way on yourself. The Korangi pay, you get musical Sabanaya, Savi gets a cheer model, be one nigga new Mumbalaya, nurse Kaburashas. The new Mumbala Mandana, and Dunga di ko dede gore dunga tsawa yana ko kenda theon di dunga di join in baros ro.
So the third then that comes after believing in emptiness, the next in order is relying on recitation. And it says the third is to recite special dharanis, which means a special mantra formula, like the 100-syllable mantra in accordance with the appropriate rituals. So when you do such recitations of the 100-syllable mantras, you do that in keeping in mind the benefit of doing this recitation. So if you understand the benefits of doing this recitation, and through that you're making this recitation, you will 100% reap the benefit of this recitation. Whereas if you think in doing this recitation, I'm doing that so that I'll be well, so that I'll be happy in this life, you could maintain that still reciting such mantras is virtue, but you're not going to harm your afflictive states of mind. And if afflictions in your mind are not undermined, it means that you're not harming the roots of suffering. And if you're not harming the roots of suffering, inevitably suffering will still arise.
And Tsumi Yijik Namdo de Lagoras. That Tsushi Mayimbi Yilachibi Namdo Wangi Tsumi Chaju Chebatia Ranshin Gagres. Tenjong Shenlaya Tembati Shenlaya Ten Truguyabadi and Gunsen Namdra Mambu Tony P Lolaya Komondi and Shenlaya Tumeki Chavadi Chigio Samaris. Shenlaya Tumeki Chav Mejamas Mase Shenlaya Nubi Chavadelia one time same thing. And Zemsun Yungures. Till the Banata, Tsultrim said there is. Shenu Shedacheva Dombik Dombasana, Kanji, Shela never Shedacheva Pin Jongon di Dombatelia, that Tsultrim Silagoras, that D Yungures, Tenjong Samba Yahujana, Sutrum Yahu Yungures, Megichubung Sutrum, Megichubung Sutrum Yahuchi Ton in the and the Dinamo Ponsang Shibi London Daddy, the D Yungores. Pigi that you shop on eating suraj and the Yungures.
So if we see well the reality of dependent origination, we will then put a stop to incorrect mental attention, to this misconception that is an incorrect mental attention. So through the understanding of dependent origination, such incorrect mental attention will abate. So dependent on correct reasons, we understand dependent origination. Through our understanding of dependent origination, we then act in a way that is beneficial to others. Not only that, we also stop acting in a way that is harmful to others, which means that we take up the practice of ethical disciplines. So ethical disciplines in which, for example, we restrain from harming others on the basis of that harm. This is what ethics are. Sometimes we think of ethics of vows, right? So vows, which means restraining from harming others on the basis of that harm. So just as, for example, here, when we look at what Lama Tsongkhapa says in quoting the questions of Subao Tantra, as when the flames of forest fires in spring uncontained burn all the underbush, so the wind of ethical conduct fans the fires of recitation, burning up their deeds with flames of great joyous effort. As when the sun's rays strike the snow, it cannot withstand the brilliance and melts. So when the sun rays of ethical conduct and recitation strike the snows of negative actions, they evaporate. As when lighting a battle lamp in pitch darkness dispel all the darkness within remaining. So the darkness of bad deeds accumulated in 1,000 lives is quickly dispelled by the lamp of recitation. So in that way, we combine those two aspects into a practice, the practice of dependent origination, or the view of dependent origination, and the practice of non-harmfulness, which are like two wings of a bird.
Dirda dinza kharsoda sanji chudi chanzang chikta tsikti namata thengu dasarwa pigi sanji chudi changbu chanjang demba denjang seti ro changbu chanjang demba denjang di khandra yonggo slandi ngoyo nesu shel shab tone ta yonggo gras ngoyo nesu khare ngoyo nesu di ani tenin jong bashig re mado Mademba round the true devajik chuchi yomares. The dinguyo nezu teres. The dishilla shabtoni, and that's shenu shidacheva pompig, and dombalia, beb, rodini son the jevaina, the kandachars, the di Sukan Nami Chibi, Meji, Madushan, the Sansan Consider said, Nanshinjita Yunguyores, Pita Namdu Suka Singitilia, and it Charchio Mare, Tanguyo Mare, and it's Sishin to Supila, come de Cadulata, Meji Parvana, that Samalo Pig Mem Barchojo, Meshuk Chembu Shujin Bar Yunguras, that Dim Parvana, and it Kari in by Nayat, and in Jobushuji sick to grass. The Dinashinki Sherab Chibu Mayimba, P. Tsultrim Soba, or Digidilaya, Nitso Sambayana, and it Shagdam Karla Jubayana, Shagmatuba, Chio Maris, Pedindi Shagosaris.
So these are all taught by the Buddha Dharma. And when you think of the Buddha Dharma, what it teaches honesty and truthfulness. Honesty and truthfulness is the Dharma. So then, if you wonder how then do I proceed? Well, I base my progression on this honesty and truthfulness. This is based on reality, the way that things exist. And if you develop that understanding, you come to see that nothing exists unto itself. No phenomena exist independently. So when you understand that nothing exists unto itself, nothing exists independently, from that, you take up ethical discipline, which abstains from harm and the basis of that harm. So going back to the quotation that Lama Tsongkhapa brings up here from the questions of Subao Sutra, it says, as when flames of forest fires in spring uncontained burns all underbush, so the wind of ethical conduct fans the fire of recitation, burning up bad deeds with flames of great joyous effort. So the word that is used here for underbush, in the word that is used in Tibetan, is describing this type of bush or plant that is volatile, that you can not rely upon, in a sense that if fire starts in that underbush, it is hard to contain. It immediately consumes up everything with great fire. So it says here, as when the flames of forest fires in spring uncontained burns all underbush, so the wind of ethical conduct fans the fires of recitation, burning up the deeds with flames of great joyous effort. So we not only develop wisdom, the wisdom of dependent rising, but we also develop ethical conduct, ethical discipline. And through the combination of these two, wisdom and ethical discipline, nothing can remain unpurified. Everything will become pure.
제대로 강한 님이 왜 새끼 돈을 쓰지면 돈 수준님이 쓰미지 돈 만나만나 marmi chungwaye mano malu sawarchi. Tserab tongni sawi, digbi mil, dirju marmi nyutu sawarchi chesu. Chesons, ta tenya digba diju loksa sons, re.
J'ai long de
Ya,
l'enseigne.
ya. Tenya digba chungwe tseman tongi pardos. Ta shakdam, ta kaddu paju chegore roji labaynas. An kirana ya, tak tsema yungres. Tak tsema mayong pardo, ane shakdam chegores.
You might wonder, how long do I need to continue with my practice of laying down negativities and restraining my mind? Here, Lama Tsongkhapa says that you should continue this recitation practice until you see signs that your bad deeds have been purified. Right, so we continue with this practice of laying down negativities and restraint until signs of purifications appear. That's it. Yeah, I'm aghast.
Yeah, and Tainaya Nalta Sema Kadutana, Yobosh Tana, Rosamni, Dikuni Chigme Saris, Papa Tomek, Papa Tomek, Judun Chamogomota, Jayag Cheduta, and Lochuni Kolegambaros, that Kong Kaduna Jena, Kongchen, Pila, Collagen, Lochuni got the Papa Tome by Nea, Jetumandos. That Tini Pila, Tipi, Jaya this sound to the Mashawa Jenny. And one the Tani that Niji the Tindu Tolaya, and Lochondi, and Tig the Drivjong Topki, and the Lamsa, Judun Chamongo, Jede Tindi. You want Nashengi, Suzuki, they were not Tarochina Samsung. Shanley, one the Tani, Gajatam, Pendoching, Miss Sambuchi, Yona Samsung, Tindi Kolon Kenny, and Shardam Koran, Ju Devina, and Tema D. or Tema Taksema Tamba in a yachi, Suzu Mashiva Zodojida, Matsu Dindi, Kyong Rasa Mares, Semaji, Imagilia, Suzulea, Taksema Dindi Unguris, Semakari Unguris Laundita, Dionoma Shude, Diresha Sirva.
So Rinpoche Lama Tsongkhapa says here that you should continue this recitation practice until you see signs that your bad deeds have been purified. So seeing signs that negative actions have been purified is, you find those stories in stories that come from the Buddhist tradition. So for example, there's the story of the way that a Sangha was practicing for 12 years in order to be able to come to see Maitreya face to face. So he had in mind always the wish to meet Maitreya in person. And for 12 years, he was working hard in order to make that happen. So finally he came to see Maitreya face to face when he turned his mind towards compassion. So there was this incident or event that is told in the story of a Sangha in which he met a sick dog, a dog that was infested by maggot. He developed compassion to that dog, and through the power of compassion, turning his mind towards compassion, he came to see Maitreya in persons, which means that in that event, it's not that he did that in thinking, may through that, may I be able to see Maitreya, but through turning his mind towards compassion, then he came to see Maitreya. So this point, Geshe says, for us illustrates that rather than doing those practices of purification, thinking, when will those signs will become evident for me? When will I see signs of my own purification? Just rather than looking for them or expecting them, just continue with the development of this honest approach, becoming a kind-hearted person, purify, lay down your negative actions and restraint. And at some point, you will start to see signs of purification. So it's not that you will miss them or fail to recognize them. If you, rather than kind of thinking all the time, when will those signs of purification appear for me, just continue with this good-hearted approach, being a kind-hearted person, purify negativities and obscurations, and at some point, signs will appear.
Tadireda, Dinamalaya, Taji Sematon, the Kanda Yunguris, and Malam Nalaya, 안지 카제 독자들이 센마 큐샤야라 소바 아니 지 쇼다와마 동야라 소바 통하다 아니 지 어딘디 아니 님마다 다완 통야라 소바 남칼란드와 멤버와스 티오들 치킨 터치더라디 다디니 마히에다 맨나고 투바세디 티교타야르다 맨나고 세디 nganzu dollar tsigiyo mardas samba nagpo chamalaya marab chedengi chik chabadukja tindioros o dintsupe ani tultuyala soba pe tsuda ben tamni ani ditsup hamdoyala soba tindi semat tsigores ro tomban nganzu $1,000 tsigiyo mardas
이제 돌아디 민 나고 삼라 동론 나고 되지.
tomban nagpo
독록
dulaw nagpo
돌로 나고 그리 미든.
dimazine yaxarita pi marab telya.
So then, in the Dharani of the goddess Chunda, the signs that are said to be. Now, if you wonder what the signs of purifications are, the signs are said to be in that source. They're said to be dreaming of vomiting black food. The actual text says that you vomit old or damaged food, right? So you vomit that food. You see also in your dream drinking and vomiting things like yogurt, milk, seeing the sun and moon flying in the sky, seeing a burning fire, subduing a buffalo or black cloth people. Now here, when it says black cloth people, the reading in Tibetan is a bit ambiguous. And Geshe says that, now the way that you read it in Tibetan is like, you see dark people. Now Geshe feels that this is probably not the right way to read that. So rather than thinking of them as dark people or people with black skin or black cloth people, Geshe reckons that he prefers to those who have an evil intent, those who are which are bad-mannered, those which have those malicious intents, those that behave in a violent way. So in your dreams, you see a dream in which you subdue a buffalo, people having such negative intent or behavior.
Dan dollar zigmeba khanesna ngazogi jizun jambiya kundo nabotini yungores jizun jomalaya kundo nabotini yungores ani peshi tanda danganzungon thanige shutse desa kumbul druta ani panden dawa thakba ro panden dawa thawala soba kunzu jagalocho mire dos ro jagalocho milya 아니 독가보지 피시 메시지 와라지레스라 딘딘자 딜자오 인지고 말스 디라.
So when it says here, in the English translation, rather than kind of saying that you subdue a black-skinned person or a dark-skinned person, it was translated as black cloth people. Geshe feels that living it in thinking that you subdue a dark-skinned person is not appropriate, particularly when you think of this origin of the teaching. So first of all, in looking at different deities, like for example, Manjushri or Tara, they have different representation. So there is black Manjushri. There's also Tara, that is black in color. Also thinking of great Indian masters such as Nagarjuna and Chandakirti, who came from South India, and people in generally people from South India have much darker skin. It is quite unlikely to meet someone from South India that has a fair complexion. Then Geshe feels that if you take this term here in this book to refer to people that have dark skin, it will certainly not be the right interpretation, given that that there are, first of all, representation of tantric deities being black, but also origins of the teachings come from people that had darker complexion.
아니 단당아주 디슈데 람름 딩 송보보 아니 장관로 송가바 침보 오늘 단위기에다 공기 아니 펜루키 주등기 숑라 시니 우미 따와 니비 갑둘야 아니 세마 가르쳐를 라운디 아 상기장 로 완전 상기장기 아니 지 물음래야 아니 상기장 아니 남칸 수천치니 아니 보다발다 이게 차비디 코나라야 나와치 심름래야 딘디총어스 아니 급 드디 아니 레벤 상기장기 군도디 피 아니 호슈슈기 넘버 체인지 제바레스 디 제롬치 남들 나라야 용구요레스 로 다디 바이나 다디 아니 드바 마다 와레스 디 마레스로 손도 괜찮은 야자자다 뭐디 시기요 말 딩이 다차자로 디 키멘스로.
Now, Geshe is not just trying to placate this point. Also, in the narration of the life story of Lama Tsongkhapa, it is said that having based his extensive writings on the 17 Pandits of Nalanda, and particularly having found the view of the middle way, there were some signs that occurred to Lama Tsongkhapa. And if you wonder what those signs were, well, in one of the narratives, it was said that in his dream, he had a vision of encountering Buddha Palita, meeting Buddha Palita in the sky, and Buddha Palita gave him a text, so gave him teachings. And in that story, it was said that the color or the complexion of Buddha Palita was dark blue. Anyway, Geshe is also using that in order to say that if you think that in your dream you see yourself subduing someone that has like a skin darkened complexion, it's probably not the right interpretation.
그래서다 아니 gelong당 gelong미 겐든 통화당 오만종이 신당 랑보당 랑보당 킹초당 랑보 킹초당 이제 레당 생기기 체당 칸상기 땐든 잭바당 아니 최년바 민바인바 꾸지기 손소스 어다든지 따서만 정바이나 되니 제바타비기 아니 따그레스 어딘지 손샤스.
So we have more signs that are mentioned here. So seeing a sangha of fully ordained monks and nuns climbing a tree from which milk emerges, seeing an elephant, seeing a bull, a mountain, a lion throne, or a palace, and hearing the Dhamma. These are all signs of purification.
시반의 산길라 대반이니 구수체보스 구수라 템바셋 산길라 대반이니 구수체바 저 구수다 아니 산기 구샤야로 소바 비기다 대비 돈이 최고로마도 아니 총구 돈이 제바나다 디바 sabjin chagoras 라 산길라 대반이니 구수체보스.
Now, the fourth part of fully applying the antidote is relying on images. And it reads, the fourth is to create images of the Buddha, having gained faith in him. So constructing statues and such, for example, statue or image of the Buddha. So you do that through faith, rather than doing it as a way of conducting business, right? So it says that it is said that if you conduct business through constructing images and so forth, it is negative. So here you rely on images as the four powerful application of the antidote through faith.
then and sanjila tebati tebayashu tenjong sombati tong sanjila tebaji getubaina di dogmebi tebares ro. So the sanji chösongbati sanji chösongbati yamsen imba nguye imba demba imba dindin tonya dilaya tenjong ten samgodas di toni sanjile tebadi ani teba yakshures dinji tebewangita ani 직 sanji kuzula soba ani kula soba shambainada ani ngone tani gewalabo chisagro gores ro digba tagores.
So when it says that here that you have gained faith in the Buddha and through that you create images of the Buddha, the best way to gain faith in the Buddha is through the teachings on dependent origination. So if you use the teachings on dependent originations means for developing faith, the faith that you will develop will be irreversible faith. So you see those teachings as being amazing, to be teachings on reality, truthful teachings. So you develop faith independent rising, which becomes the best type of faith that you could have. And with that faith, when you create images of the Buddha, you accumulate virtue and you purify negativities. You create powerful virtues and you purify negativities.
다 상기다 디 초된라 초반 넘반 하조 쳬보스 라 다 상기레 안 디 초된 슬라운드 다지 상기 잠블인들 쳬네 다 고만양인데 다 데술 때 요반자 아니 상기 린셀로 소바 라 상기 린셀로 소바 슈비게 피게 아니 다 초된 세고라 텔레야 초된 세고레스 산지기 최대세디 데레스 간지 산지 고송 투된 쳬비기 쳬대 영인기 아니 두수다 최대레스 라 델레야 쳐바나 조체바디.
It also says in the next one, relying on worships, is the fifth is to make various types of offerings to the Buddha and his stupas. So the Buddha, we spoke about the Buddha, and then we have stupas. So stupas used to host relics of the Buddha after the passing away of the Buddha. So then stupas for us now represent the qualities of body, speech, and mind of Buddha. So keeping in mind this, the symbolism of body, speech, and mind, here the fifth power is making offerings, various offerings to them, right? So the fifth is to make various types of offerings to the Buddhas or to the Buddha and his stupas.
terdadinawalaya sangi chode sangi de di chode nawala chode tandanganzu chi sode di ngoni tambo sangi rinse shusagi da shugdom rojre dos ra ani dirita the sangi rinse said there di shamba dindike insamardan tensa rinse said the shuji be ani bebu shuji ten de ji yungkoras the ani 당원의 가리나 미신스러 원의 산지기 린세디 산지 셰슈비 카둘레야 산지 오다레 산지기 차센레 산지기 셈로 소바 러 아니 어디서다 산지기 린세레스 러 산지기 린세스나 메데교치다 아니 셰슈비 카둘레 메교지 다비기 아니 셰사마진다 다 공부 조사베질레야 공부 메사 따온디 디나니 믹스 땡기 딘디 인사마레스 산지 셈 산지 따지 아니 고샬라 소바 디소 다 약슈도 드조레스라.
When the section refers to making offerings to stupas, and as Geshe said, and also we then nowadays also make stupas and such, or we see stupas in many different places. The original way that a stupa was made and used was to host relics of the Buddha, right? So relics of the Buddha, not only relics of the Buddha having passed away, but also things that belong to the Buddha when he was still alive, like, for example, pieces of his hair or fingernails or a tooth and such. So you had stupas that contained parts of a thing that belonged to the Buddha, even you could say pieces of the flesh. So these are, you could say, real relics. Now nowadays, it is quite popular to speak about relics, right? So someone left a relic, the body was cremated, and relics were found amidst the ashes and so forth. So when we think of the relics of the Buddha, it's not limited just to that. There are also things that belong to the Buddha while he was still alive.
There ganji sangi rinsel ro sangi rinsel ngone thane nganzola ya chinlab ya thakchu rinsel di sangi chöderes samontomani gite chanjugusem ninji chembola so ti dangone 이게 산지 칠럽이스로 산지 칠럽이 요나 두주톤의 용거래 두주톤의 칠럽 용하면은 산지 칠럽세다 요 말했으로 어딘자 간지 어들 딘디기다 잠바던 인지 잔주고 셈라 소바 콜론 딘디지기 톤이다 안직 미센데 미삼부 미야부 용약 체도 된다 아니 초바부 아니 마니사 어두스 제바나 당원의 산지기 칠럽 주고요 서레스로 근데 트바타고 서레스
So we speak about relics, but when you think of what real relics are, the real relics are relics of the Buddha, are bodhicitta, great compassion, emptiness, and so forth. And we receive them through the blessings of the Buddha. From the blessings of the Buddha, we come to develop loving kindness and compassion, bodhicitta, the view of emptiness. Without the blessings, they will not arise. So then in thinking of how then do we approach that, we develop loving kindness and compassion, bodhicitta. We, through that, become honest people, good or kind-hearted people. And through that, when we make offerings, when we recite mantras such as the Om Mani Padme Hum mantra, we receive the blessings. And also, actions of the past become purified.
남중간서 베베들라 왔다 산지 링셀이야 임페이어스 마운드레이어스 당원의 산지 링셀 단중에 쉬대 단인지대 잔주고 셈다 또만인도 위실서 원의 단인 페이어스 따라 소수 페이어 배전 제반은 슈즈 페이어스 베니 남긴 타더님이 심전 탐지기베 팬디드 통이 딘디기베 아니 슈크치 뭐야 페이어스로 단 페이유규디 아니 페마추어치 페야 메교즈야 리허잡네 피글이야 아니 뜸니 샤샤와나 안 디지털라로지 그래도 asra.
Now, another thing that people sometimes say about relics is that they multiply, they increase, and so forth. So then when we think of the increase of relics becoming multiplied, well, think about it in relation to compassion, bodhicitta, emptiness, an exalted wisdom that realizes emptiness. This is what needs to increase, to multiply. To increase, to multiply, the intention to attain a state of enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings that extend to the reaches of space, to be of benefit and peace to all the sentient beings. This is the relics that is to be increased, that needs to be increased. So rather than that, if we have expectations or hopes that something that is not to increase will increase, we're actually wasting our time on something that will not come to pass.
There's that Trubana Sanjida Geshe Chembo Namji, 10 tuition songs. That did it, Konzu 10 toned that, and it didn't Yabana, Kondu Shivana, Yabanda, Sanji down, Sanji say, Geshe Chanju Samba so good, 10 toned the any big dangi, and Chik Simjan Tamjelaya, and it's 7 hinge chimby with Guyon shoot ever chick, any love change, Kiwich, ya 10 to bana. The D social penguins. The Tindiji Google series.
Now let's look at the last one, the 6th. It is relying on names. The 6th is to listen to and retain the names of the Buddhas and the great Bodhisattvas. These are the practices that are explicitly mentioned in the Compendium of Trainings, but there are many others. So the 6th is to listen to and retain the names of the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, to listen to them, to retain them, to recite them, but not just to recite the names of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, but also to develop great compassionate love in doing so. So if you listen to them, if you recite them, if you retain them with an attitude of great compassionate love, then your mind becomes very powerful. You attain this very powerful state, which is helpful to the mind. So we'll leave it here for today. All right. So we'll finish off with doing the final Lamrim dedication. For my two collections, vast space to have a mass from working with effort that is practiced for a great length of time, may I become the chief leading Buddha for all those whose minds' wisdom eyes blinded by ignorance. Even if I do not reach this state, may I be held in your loving compassion for all life's manjushri. May I find the best of completed graded path of the teachings, and may I please all the Buddhas by my practice, using skillful means drawn by the strong force of compassion. May I clear the darkness from the minds of all beings with the points of the path as I have discerned them. May I uphold Buddha's teachings for a very long time, with my heart going up with great compassion. In whatever direction the most precious teachings have not yet spread, or once spread have declined, may I reveal this treasure of happiness and aid. May the minds of those who wish for liberation be granted bounteous peace, and may the Buddha's deeds be nourished for a long time by even this graded path of enlightenment, completed due to the wondrous virtuous conduct of the Buddhas and their sons. May all humans and non-human beings who eliminate adversity and create conducive conditions for practicing the excellent path, never departed in any of their lives from the purest path praised by the Buddhas. Whenever someone makes effort to act in accordance with the tenfold Mahayana virtuous practices, may always be assisted by the mighty ones, and may ocean of prosperity spread everywhere. Thank you.